Hey guys, this is Tauna, and today we're going to be talking about foundations. We're going to be talking about building 5 different decks from the initial beginner box and starter collection. You know, these are the first couple things that you're going to be picking up as a newer player, or, you know, even if you're not a newer player, you're able to pick them up and use them towards your collection and everything. If you are, like, you know, looking to start out, you don't have all this that I've got, you can't see it, but just imagine there's a huge amount of cards over there, and you know, you want to be able to use that kind of stuff, especially if you are shifting over to Commander, because that is obviously designed not for Commander, but for Standard. However, they are useful for Commander if you are looking to go that direction. So I have built 5 different decks from these initial starter collection and beginner box. There is going to be additional cards that you're going to be requiring. I tried to keep it not too expensive for them. One of them is more expensive. There's kind of like a range, I guess, from, you know, a little bit of an upgrade up to more. Roughly, I think each of them has about 30 new cards in it that you are going to have to purchase singles for, but that's purely because in the beginner box and starter collection, there is stuff that is not there that you would likely need to build a full 100 card deck. While if you are building just a standard deck, then you should have the resources there to be able to build a lot of them. So having a look at the different stuff, you've got around 200 cards in the beginner box. These are divided between the different jumpstart packs. I think there's 10 different jumpstart packs within here, across a variety of different things. So, you know, you've got a health gain one, you've got a cat based one, there's an elf based one as well, I believe, a vampire one. You know, there's a whole bunch of different things that are just across these 10 different packs. So we've got a variety of different creatures that we've kind of taken from here, and different kind of, we've used some of the enchantments as well, the instant sorceries, etc. And between all 3 of them, you've got a lot of lands, right? Like you've got 82 lands here in the initial one, in the beginner box, and then if we have a look at the starter collection, you've got a huge amount of lands in there too. The starter collection, if you were like just picking up one of these to actually build these decks, the starter collection is primarily going to be the one you're wanting, because one, it's just got more cards that are going to be throughout these decks that I've built here, and secondly, it just has a huge variety of cards. Now, the one exception that I made for these precons, as opposed to so I built them from the starter collection and beginner box, but for each of them, I did add like the 3 commander staples, which is Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Command Tower. So all 5 of them do have those, because those are essentially staples. You do get 1 set of those within this starter collection, which is great. However, if we are building, you know, multiple different decks, 5 different decks from this, you are going to need multiple of them. You could potentially, like, if you've, you know, sleeved them all up in similar style sleeves. So I've picked up these sleeves. They're like, I think it was like $30 for 1,000 or something ridiculous like that. Really, really cheap. And while they are cheap, they are, you know, decent quality. Like I like them a lot. If you do have, like, you know, only 1 copy of these 3 cards, you could potentially share it between your decks. Just like, you know, when you switch to a different deck, go through, find where they are in the deck you just played and pick them out and stuff. But each of them is probably like $1 max. Right? Like they are relatively cheap. You get them in every single precon. Okay, I say every single 99% of precons you'll get them in. And then, you know, they hand them out for a whole bunch of different reasons, right? So you will be able to get them pretty easily. So in the like actual starter collection, there's a huge variety of stuff too. You've got, you know, stuff that is meant to build off of this beginner box stuff. So similar kind of tribal / kindred stuff to it. But then you got a huge variety of other stuff. And all of that's really useful for us to build these decks. Some of this has like got 4 times. So like, you know, you get 4 of the same card. I think like the Hinterland Sanctifier that was up the top here, you do get 4 of those, for example. But obviously in Commander, given the fact that you are limited to 1 of each card in each deck, you can't use them throughout multiple decks. So I'm going to try and explain this in a more beginner friendly way as well, just because if you are, you know, starting out with a beginner box and starting out with like the starter collection, then you are most likely a beginner. But, you know, if you're a veteran, you know, if anyone has any questions, make sure you leave them down below. We have a whole bunch of veterans who watch this channel as well, a whole bunch of people who started and stuff. So they can answer if I don't get to it first. So You know, before I show you off your the decks, though, I've got a few things first. Make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you share the video around, all that kind of stuff. You know, this could be the last video you ever see from me because the algorithm absolutely hates me and likes to throw me away from you guys. So make sure you share it, make sure you subscribe and stuff, so that way you don't miss a single one of our videos. We do a huge variety of stuff, whether it's stuff about precon, stuff about, you know, building decks, everything from all the news and stuff. This is one of the best channels, I will say that. I think I've heard that on nearly every single one of my announcements. This is one of the best channels for the news for my Magic the Gathering, so make sure you guys subscribe just for that. We are also one of the only channels that asks you guys what you want. So for example, you know, we're coming up on 10,000 subscribers. What do you guys want me to do? Just kind of celebrate that. At the moment, you know, a pre-con giveaway is winning, but people also want me to rank all my decks, which I love. I love that. I've got 30-something decks, like over here, like, you know, all marked out. That's a green one. That is why I picked up the only green one. But, you know, I love kind of asking you guys questions. Like, for example, I ask you guys the questions about these. Like, you know, when I'm building these, how would you like me to do it? Stick to commanders and themes from the set? Or, you know, do you want me to just make random ones? So I stuck to the commanders primarily. I think there's one that is not within Foundations, and then the themes that are built on within the beginner box and within Foundations overall. So if you are a new player and you're getting into Foundations, then even if you can't get the cards that are actually within these decks from, you know, the beginner box or starter box, then you're able to also just build them with cards that you're going to potentially pull from going to Foundations starter events, or like a pre-release or that kind of thing. All right, so let's get into the first one here, and we're looking at Niv Mizzet Visionary, and I'm going to switch this over to decks so that way it's easier for you guys to see. So Niv Mizzet Visionary is a new take on a character that we've seen a lot of, which is Niv Mizzet. Primarily, he works by dealing burn damage to people, which is essentially when you just deal non-combat damage to someone. His previous versions. But this new version is a little bit different. Instead of working off of that, you know, dealing that damage, he actually benefits off of it instead, which is whenever a source you control, so that's a spell, a creature, an enchantment, or whatever, deals damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards. It has to deal non-combat damage. So that's when you have a card that's like, you know, a lightning bolt, that is, deal 3 damage to any target. When you deal 3 damage to an opponent with that, you are then going to get to draw 3 cards. You have no maximum hand size as well, which is great because primarily, like most of the time, you are limited to having 7 cards in your hand. So this kind of bypasses that because he's going to draw you a lot of cards, and especially in how I've kind of built him. So the way I've built him is essentially a spell slinger deck. So he is going to be mostly casting instants and sorceries and then benefiting from those. So which are going to be dealing, you know, that non-combat damage. So our artifacts here, we've mostly, you know, we've got the Soul Ring and the Arcane Signet here. We've got the Pyromancer's Goggles. So I'm going to start out. Essentially, the way I've built these up is the stuff within here is going to be the actual cards pulled from the beginner box and the starter kit. And then when we get to the sideboard, those are the things that I suggest you guys add in. So you get a Pyromancer's Goggles in here, which is great because it means that when you cast a red instant or sorcery, you get to copy it. So you get to essentially cast, well, not cast, you get to, when you cast it, it's going to have 2 versions of it go onto the stack, and you can choose new targets for that. So if you've got one that's like whenever you cast a lightning bolt and you tap this to cast it, you then get 2 lightning bolts that you can choose to cast onto different things, which is really great. Our creatures in here are going to be benefiting from either casting spells, so like the Heartfire Immolator here, it has prowess when if you cast a non-creature spell, so an instant, sorcery, enchantment, etc., it's going to get buffed up. And then you can, you know, throw it at someone directly with combat damage, or you could just sacrifice it to deal damage to a creature or planeswalker. Now, that's not going to proc Niv Mizzet, unfortunately, but it is a way for us to be able to remove an opponent's stuff. The other thing is, because we've got a lot of instants in here, we can cast those on opponent's turns. So something like Burn Cutthroat here is going to benefit from that a lot. So a lot of these are stuff like, you know, whenever you cast a non-creature spell or whenever you draw cards as well, because of the fact that we've got a bunch of card draw from different instants and sorceries in here too. We've got ways to be able to reduce the cost of these with Mocking Sprite. Our kind of like our secondary commander in here is going to be Avika, Enigma Goliath, which makes it so that whenever you cast these spells, you are then going to be able to create a whole bunch of goblins. And then those goblins can go and attack, or, you know, you could sacrifice them to just block things, or, you know, there's a bunch of different ways you can make use of them. She's essentially just going to be a very strong card that you can potentially get out. And then between her and Niv Mizzet, you're going to be able to just deal a lot of damage and be able to create a lot of goblins and do cool stuff with them. Our enchantments, we've got Impact Tremors because of the fact that we've got a bunch of cards to create a lot of little dudes, as well as this is going to trigger. Sorry, I keep saying proc when I should say trigger. It's going to trigger Niv Mizzet, so each time a creature enters, you now deal 1 damage to each opponent and draw 3 cards. That is crazy. So our instants are mostly just removal, like some damage stuff. We've got some draw cards and everything. We've got a couple counters as well, which is great to be able to prevent enemies from our opponents from playing stuff. We've got, you know, some more draw, create some more creatures, and a lot of ways to be able to control our opponents with, you know, I have got like 3 different counters in here. So if someone goes to try and remove your Niv Mizzet, you've got a counter ready to be able to stop them. So you've got refute or negate to be able to do that. Essence Scatter in case someone's playing, you know, their commander or something to counter that. And then we've got Bolt Bend to be able to like bend away an ability. If someone casts a spell or ability, kind of removing your commander, then you can use this to kind of throw it somewhere else. The other thing is that I have added in our like in our additions here that aren't in either of these 2 boxes, a lot of lands. In the initial box, you get like, you know, a whole bunch of basic lands, and then you get the like life gain lands and then the guild gate. So this one here, but those all enter, and the temples, but those all enter tapped, which means that when you play them, they're already like essentially used for the turn. They're tapped. You can't use them for that turn. So this is going to allow us to be able to upgrade that, to be able to get more cards out and more mana out that we can use immediately rather than needing to wait a little bit for it. As I said, you know, just some more sorceries in here, deal some damage, draw some cards, you know, copy a creature, which is nice, draw more cards, a lot of card draw stuff in here. There is a lot of kind of card draw within the precon, within the 2 decks, which is really like within the starter collection and the beginner box. So a lot of really great stuff in there. So as I said, for our sideboard here, this is going to be the new cards that you're going to have to purchase to be able to add in it. So for these ones, this is going to add up to 38-ish US dollars currently. As I said, I added a lot of lands in here. So these are all going to be red, blue, lands because of our commander being only, you know, red blue in his identity. That means that our whole deck needs to be either red cards, blue cards, or cards that are red or blue. So we've got a lot of cards that are going to kind of make use of that, and a lot of lands to be able to help with that. We've got Reliquary Tower as well, just an additional way for us to have no maximum hand size in case Niv Mizzet does get removed. Then we don't need to we don't need to go discard our cards because we have another way to be able to get no maximum hand size. Onto our actual like cards that we've added in here. We've got an Offer You Can't Refuse for additional counters. We've got a couple more draw cards. Bolt Wave is a new card, which is really, really great because it's going to deal 3 damage to each opponent. So that's 3, 6, 9 damage. And now that is drawing us 3, 6, 9 cards, as well as the fact that it only costs 1 red mana to play. This actually card is going to be huge in a whole bunch of different like burn decks, a whole bunch of decks that are dealing like, you know, non-combat damage. As I said, a lot of draw stuff. We've got Storm Chaser's talent to get us some more creatures. Coruscation Mage. We've got a bunch of new things in here that I've added in that are whenever you cast a non-creature spell, deal damage to people. So I think we've got like 4 more versions of that with Coruscation Mage, Electrostatic Field, Erebor, and then Firebrand Archer. So 4 different versions of that. Oh, and Kessig Framebreaker. We're going to be dealing a lot of damage directly to people and then drawing a lot of cards because of that. And that's also going to proc all those cards that are like, whenever you draw a card, get a +1 counter, or whenever you draw your second card, do this kind of thing. Harmonic Prodigy is great because all of our shamans and wizards are going to trigger additional times, and we've got a lot of shamans and shamans and wizards within our deck. Some more kind of card draw, some more cost reduction stuff. Fire Inscription here to deal damage again to each opponent whenever we cast an instant or sorcery. And then we've got like Stormkiln Artist to create a treasure each time we cast something, Archmage of Runes to draw more cards, and then we do have a couple infinite win combos. So these are the two different versions of Niv Mizzet that we've got here. These both are whenever you draw a card, you deal 1 damage to any target. So that means that you can deal damage to an opponent, which means you then draw a card, thanks to our commander drawing cards whenever you deal damage to people. And you can see how this works because then you just drew a card, which means you can deal a damage to an opponent. And then you draw another card. Now, keep in mind that you could potentially deck yourself out with this because you're just going to be drawing a heap of cards. But you can also, like, you don't want to realistically do this until people are low enough that your cards in your deck are greater than the opponent's life. So you start with essentially 99 cards in your deck. You draw 7 at the start, so you've got like a bit of work to do to reduce your opponent's health down before this. Now, keep in mind that Niv Mizzet it says you draw that many cards, so you can't stop yourself. It's not you may draw that many cards, you are going to draw that many cards, which means that you are going to potentially make yourself lose the game if the amount of cards in your deck is smaller than the opponent's health that is remaining. You can, stop this in other ways. If you remove your own Niv Mizzet, like the commander one there, then you're going to be fine. But yeah. Let's move on to our second one here. We've got Alicia who laughs at fate. So both Niv Mizzet and Alicia are within the main Foundations set. Alicia is a commander who is based around a number of different things. First of all, she's based around +1/+1 counters, which means whenever you attack, you're going to take a counter, put it onto her, and now her power has gone up. And her power and toughness has gone up by 1. So, when she first attacks, she's going to become a 3/3. And then when she attacks again, a 4/4, etc. Her second part here is really great, though. At the beginning of your end step, if you attacked, now keep in mind that Alicia herself does not need to attack. You just have to attack with anyone. You get to return a creature card with mana value less than or equal to her power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So she, at the moment, is a 2/2, which means that on the first turn you play her, on turn 3, as long as you attacked with something on that turn, you can then return something from your graveyard that is a 2 power or less. Easy. So she's going to be based around dealing combat damage and reanimating, which is bringing something from your graveyard back onto your battlefield, and a bunch of other stuff that I've kind of shifted into here. So as for our artifacts in here from the actual beginner box and starter collection, we've got normal stuff. We've got Swiftfoot Boots, Wishclaw Talisman, and Shrieker that are different from our Niv Mizzet one here. So Swiftfoot Boots allows us to be able to attack with Alicia on the turn that she comes in because they grant her haste as long as you equip it onto her. And then you also will have Hexproof, which means that she won't be able to be targeted by spells or abilities from your opponent. That is really, really great because of the fact that your opponent will most likely want to remove her because she's going to be bringing stuff back. The Wishclaw Talisman is great in here because it allows you to be able to search your deck to find a card and then put it into your hand. So we can go in and we can find a card that's going to synergize really well with what we need at the moment. Or like if we need a removal card, like to remove something the opponent has or something, we can do that. We can also, do a bunch of really great things with it, as well as it's just a fun card because it's going to then hand itself over to one of your opponents and then they get to do it. And you can essentially do some kind of politicking with this and do it to someone and then say, hey, if I do this to you, will then you pass it back to me, please? Which would be great. And then we've got Fire Shriek in here, which is going to give double strike, which is going to make it so that all of your damage from your Alicia, if your Alicia hits someone or a creature or something, she's going to deal both first strike and regular combat damage, essentially kind of doubling the damage that she's going to deal. As for our creatures, as you can imagine, we've got a lot of creatures that are based around either attacking or sacrificing themselves, mostly kind of thing. So we've got a bunch of ways to be able to just, when we hit things, buff things up. We've got ways to sacrifice our creatures. So, for example, our, where is it? Arbiter of Woe here, for example, when it comes in, you need to sacrifice a creature. The Immerse Storm Predator here, you can, sacrifice a creature to give it indestructible. Or the Red Cap Gutter Dweller here, sacrifice a creature to put a +1 on this creature and then exile the top card of your library, and then you can play that. So essentially kind of like Impulse Draw, it's called, where, you exile the top card, you can play it for the end of the turn. It's kind of like drawing, but if you don't play it, then you don't get that card back in any way. Most of it, as I said, is just based around kind of combat or other ways to be able to bring stuff back. There's a lot of kind of combat-based creatures, which is good in a deck like this Alicia deck, where we want to be hitting our opponents hard, fast, and, without them having a chance of being able to come back from it, as well as just being able to bypass, any securities they've got by removing their creatures with something like Massacre Worm, or, making it so that we're drawing cards whenever our creatures die, which is great. There's a whole bunch of ways to make use of this. Onto our enchantments here. The only one that I'm probably going to focus on too much here is the Demonic Pact, because of the way that you guys are going to probably look at it and be like, Tauna, why would we include this into our deck? The others are pretty straightforward. Deal double damage when you hit someone, or, give something menace, so it has to be blocked by 2 or more creatures. Sacrifice a creature, draw some cards. The Demonic Pact here, though, is at the beginning for upkeep, you're going to choose one of these 3 things. You get to either deal 4 damage to something and then gain 4 life, make someone discard 2 cards, draw 2 cards, or lose the game. Obviously, that lose the game is the one that you're probably like, why? Why would I want to lose the game? We have 3 really beneficial things from here, and then 1 that is going to be really bad. But that one, we'll talk about that in a bit, because that's going to be a great combo within this deck. But mind you, you won't want to be playing this card unless, 1, you think you're going to be winning within 3 turns, or 2, you have that combo piece in your hand. So our instants are just some kind of, ways to be able to protect our commander here, a couple different removal things. So Hero's Downfall to destroy a creature, or Abrade to destroy an artifact. And then we've got card draw from this Thrill of Possibility. Again, our lands are pretty kind of straightforward. They're the ones just from within the precon there. And then our sorceries here are the things that are going to be either, some additional damage here from giving our creatures trample and then drawing a card. We've got a couple other removal ones with Feed the Swarm or Eaten Alive. Cemetery recruitment there to bring something back to our hand. Dread Summons, make people mill things. So that's taking the top card of your library and then putting it straight into the graveyard. And then you get to create a bunch of zombies. Great, I love zombies. And then Zombify to bring something from the graveyard back to our battlefield. This one here is what I was talking about, though, is that combo, Harmless Offering. Target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. So the combo here is you let this tick down until the only one that is left is you lose the game, and then you use this Harmless Offering to offer it to someone else. And it's not an offer that they can refuse. They have to take it. So you give that to someone else, and then at the beginning of their next upkeep, the only option they can choose is lose the game, and then they lose the game. So it's a great way to be able to just win the game at the very end there. So moving on to our kind of sideboard here, we've got, as I said, the lands, because we need to fill out the lands with some better ones that are going to come in untapped. We've got a couple artifacts here to buff up our creatures with the Basilisk Collar and with the Tarian Soul Cleaver. Tortured Existence, my friend's favorite card of all time. You can pay black and then discard a card from your hand to put a card from your graveyard back into your hand. So you discard a card. So you in your hand, you take one of the cards, you put it into the graveyard, and then you take one from your graveyard, put it back into your hand. So you can then use that with Alicia's ability to put something into your graveyard that Alicia can bring back, and then also put something from your graveyard that you might have wanted, but you didn't want Alicia to bring it back at the moment, or, she's not able to at the moment, back into your hand. So there's a bunch of great ways to make use of that. We've got ways to be able to make other people remove their creatures too, because we can bring our stuff back. They can't. Great. Intai makes it so we discard something to put a +1 onto a creature and then give it trample. So now we can give We can give Alicia another +1/+1 counter and trample until end of turn. Plus, we put a card into our graveyard that Alicia can bring back. And also, we get to exile the top card of our library, allowing us to be able to play that, which is, some essential card draw, right? Lightning Greaves to help protect Alicia again. Ripples of Undeath. So I've added some ways to be able to take cards from our library and put them straight into our graveyard with mill. So then we can bring stuff back from there. And Ripples is honestly a cheap, great version of this mill card. Buried Alive, a tutor, which is going to let you look through your deck for 3 creature cards, put them straight into your graveyard, which probably sounds dumb, but then because of Alicia, we can bring them back. Braids is some nice removal there. We've got a couple ways to give haste as well, so that way we can attack on the turn things come out. Victimize, sacrifice a creature to bring 2 back from our graveyard, and then, Alicia can bring back that one from our graveyard as well. Pitiless Plunderer, because whenever our creature dies, we're going to be able to create treasures. We're going to end up with a bunch of treasures. Moving on to the next one here, which is Tatiova. So she is an older card, not a new one, but she does come within, I believe it is the starter collection, I think it's the starter collection she comes in. So I'm going to make use of her here, but I kind of wanted the Simic deck, so that's the green-blue deck, to be based around landfall, which is the direction I've taken here, which is whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, so whether it's from your hand, so you play your land for turn, or whether you bring it back in with like a card that's like whenever you do this, bring a land into the battlefield. There's a bunch of ways to be able to do it. You're going to get some cool procs from it. So our artifacts in here are just the normal ones. I did add Gilded Lotus from the beginner box or the starter collection into here because we're going to have a bunch of lands out. We can easily play this, and then that's going to allow us to be able to play more stuff because now that 5 mana has turned into 3 mana from every turn from now on. Our creatures in here are mostly based around just kind of ramping up and doing stuff when we either card draw or when we, get some land stuff out or synchronize with our lands and everything. The actual couple, like the beginner box and starter collection, didn't have a huge amount of stuff that worked well with this strategy, unfortunately. But, I think there was enough in there that we can make use of it well enough and add in some newer cards that can kind of synergize well with it. And it also kind of, this deck that I've built here has a kind of sub theme or, a side theme of big creatures because we will have so many lands out and therefore so much mana. We can then, play some of these big creatures and make use of this. So, Surak, whenever we attack, if we have creatures total power greater or 8 or greater, we get to give something haste, which is great. Or, Prime Speaker Zagana. Now we're going to be able to cast at her and get a bigger Prime Speaker Zagana, and just a bunch of great ways to make use of having so much mana. Our enchantments are a couple kind of removal stuff, so a removal stuff with witness protection, some extra card draw. We've got Garrix to give us trample, Garrix Uprising there. Ordeal of Nyla is going to buff up a creature, and then also once you get 3 or more +1s onto it, you're going to sack it and then get 2 basic lands from our deck. And then Prime Evil Bounty here is going to give us a bunch of landfall triggers, a bunch of triggers to buff creatures up with those +1/+1 counters, and then also give us some creature tokens, which is great. Our instants are just some protection and removal-y kind of stuff. Not too much to kind of focus on there. Our lands, we've got a bunch of forests and a bunch of islands in here. And then our sorceries, there was really not all that much in terms of like ramp cards. So that's the ones that go find a basic land and put it onto the battlefield, or find a land, put it onto the battlefield. But we do have Bushwhack and circuitous route in here. And then we've got River's Rebuke as a big kind of removal there. So our new cards that we've added in, as I said, a bunch of lands, not going to focus on them too much. We've got ways to give us no maximum hand size because it's going to draw a bunch with Tatiova. Ways to be able to play additional lands as well with Explore or Growth Spiral or, On the Trail. Ominous Seas is whenever you draw a card, you're going to put a 4 shadow counter onto this. And then when it gets to 8 of those, you can remove those to create a big 8/8 Kraken, which is going to be, we're going to proc this a bunch because we're going to be drawing a bunch of cards in this deck. Some more different ramp as well. And then we've got a few kind of landfall triggers with Scoot Swarm, the classic landfall trigger, because it's going to create a bunch of insects. And then we've got Tireless Provisioner. Make a food or a treasure each time something comes in. And then, this is a lot of landfall stuff, which is kind of what I wanted to go for, because I think it's kind of a classic Simic thing. And as a beginner, a classic kind of Simic deck is going to be a really great deck to kind of start with, in my opinion, because it's going to kind of have easy triggers, because most of the triggers are just, if you put a land out, do this stuff. If you put a land out, do this stuff kind of thing. So it's going to be pretty simple from there on. I really love this deck. I really, really love it. And then we've got Virtue of Knowledge. So then each time those landfall triggers happen, it's going to happen an additional time, which is really good. All right, moving on to the next one here, we've got Cutsil. Now, I think she is the only one that I've pulled on who was not in Foundations and not within the starter collection. So she's going to be a newer one, but I was looking for one that synergized well with a bunch of the cat cards that you do get within here. There is a bunch of cat cards within the beginner box and within the starter collection, as well as within Foundations overall. And she also synergizes well with all of the +1/+1 counter stuff. So we've got a bunch of stuff that synergizes well with that, as well as tokens. So this deck here is based around +1/+1 counters, tokens, and then a side minorish kind of theme of cats. So that's all the kind of stuff you're going to see within here, is creating tokens, creating +1 counters onto things, and buffing up our creatures from there. Our enchantments are much the same. Just kind of, put +1s onto things or create tokens, etc. Our instants are some protection stuff, as well as a couple kind of removal things with Disenchant and Broken Wings there, and then Stroke of Midnight too. And then our sorceries are going to be creating a bunch of tokens with Release the Dogs. Overrun is kind of our win con in this, because it's going to be buffing all of our creatures by +3/+3 and trample. And if you've got a bunch of little creatures out, then from there you're just going to be able to run the board over with them, or overrun the board, I guess. Onto the sideboard here, a bunch of lands, as I said, and then just stuff that synergizes as well with our +1 counters. As you'll notice up here, this one does cost $60 US, but 30 of that is within this Scythe Cat Cub, which is really, really cute. Is currently only really high. It may stay high, but it is also high because of the fact that it has technically only just released, because it was within Jumpstart 2025, which is this, only released this weekend for pre-release. So it may drop down in price. It may stay high in price. It may drop down. Who knows? And I said, a bunch of stuff to kind of synergize well with all those +1 counters, and then some more cats and stuff, which is really cute. And I love cats. So I wanted to have, a cat side deck of this one that synergized well and worked rather well, especially with the new Arabo and stuff. All right, and then on to our last one here, we've got Elenda, Saint of Dusk. So this one here I have based around life gain. We've just got life gain, life gain, life gain. We've got some infinite combos in here. This one, you will notice the sideboard is quite expensive. You do not need all of those cards. You can potentially look at adding or changing some of them. I've built it as having a 3 or 4 infinite combos. I think it's 2 or 3 infinite combos or something. There's a bunch of really great infinite combos within here that are just going to win you the game really easily. So this is life gain, as well as some stuff to kind of work alongside Elenda, and then a kind of minor-ish side theme of vampires. So our artifacts are just going to be, normal stuff. We've got Basilisk Collar here to give lifelink, which is going to let us gain life as well whenever a creature deals damage. We've got onto our creatures, just a bunch of stuff that is either gain life or benefit from gaining life. We do have Ali, Eternal Pilgrim in here to be able to sacrifice stuff to be able to gain life from that. So if you've got a creature that you don't necessarily need at the moment, you can either gain life from it, or you could sacrifice it to remove something. So that her second part here, sacrifice another creature, exile target non-land permanent. You need to have 10 more life than your starting life, but we're going to have that easily in this deck. Bunch of stuff to just gain life and stuff. It's pretty simple the way this kind of deck is working, because it's just hit stuff, gain life from it, and then whenever you gain life, you can make opponents kind of lose life, which is really fun. We do have the Lyra Dawnbringer in here, who is from the beginner box or starter collection as well, which is great, giving all our angels +1/+1 a lifelink. So we've got a few kind of angels in here. We've got the Herald of Faith there, we've got the Dazzling Angel, Vitality, the Overseer here. Yeah. So, you know, some stuff that kind of synergize well with her, as well as she herself has lifelink. So she's going to be able to give you additional lifelink as well. Our enchantments, a removal with pacifism, ways to be able to buff up Elenda as well with Angelic Destiny, because it's going to give her flying and lifelink. So you're going to be able to fly over opponents, deal lifelink damage, then heal a bunch, then buff her up. Because she can get up to a 10/10 just purely from her own abilities, as long as you've gained enough life above your starting life. Our instants are removal mostly, and then a couple ways to be able to protect Elenda with the Valorous Stance and Undying Malice. A removal here that gains your life, which is great. Ways to protect her with, you know, the Moment of Triumph and Divine Resilience as well. She's going to be a target for removal. Right, she's going to be a target for removal because people want to remove her. Now, she does unfortunately also have the hexproof from instance. Oh, no, that's okay. I thought she had protection from instance, but no, it's hexproof from instance, which means opponents aren't going to be able to target with her with their removals. So she's either going to need to be board wiped or removed at sorcery speed, which also exists. And onto our sorceries, just, you know, gain life and a couple removal things, as well as a big board wipe here with Fumigate. So the way you want to use this is play Fumigate. Now, while that is still on the stack, so it hasn't resolved yet, it's still like you say, you know, I've cast this, and then while that is on the stack, I will cast this as well, because the second thing you cast will resolve first before this one resolves. So you cast this one, and then you play one of your ways to be able to give her indestructible, and then she doesn't get destroyed, but everyone else's stuff does, and boom, you therefore are going to win because you've got a huge life linked thing that you also just gained a heap of life and stuff. So onto our sideboard, the lands as usual. And then onto our, like, you know, actual stuff here, we've got a bunch of stuff that is, you know, whenever a creature enters, either under your control or a creature enters at all or under an opponent's control, gain some life. So anytime we're gaining life, we're going to be buffing her up. You know, once we get to that, I think it was a 10 above your starting health, boom, now she's huge. We've got ways to be able to card draw with Dawn of Hope. More ways to be able to benefit from that gain life with the Essence Channeler and Karlov and stuff. Ways to be able to protect her with Lightning Greaves. Caduceus, Staff of Hermes, we can give that to Elenda. And now Elenda has +5/+5 on top of her already, plus, you know, 6 that she gets herself, and then also prevent all damage that would be dealt to her. Crazy. And as I said, you know, there's a couple things in here that are rather expensive that you can potentially drop one of these. I would say I would want to keep one of them, but you could drop one of these. So these are Bloodthirsty Conqueror and Exquisite Blood. They both have essentially the same ability, which is whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. But the way they synergize is with all of these cards in here, like Sanguine Bond or like the Veto here, which is whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that life. So let's start it out by you gaining 1 life, right? Let's say you gain 1 life. So that means you get target opponent loses that much life. So you make an opponent lose that much life. So proccing this, and then you gain life. So you can see how that's an infinite combo where you gaining life makes the opponent losing life, and then them losing life makes you gain life. So with that combo there, you can easily win the game. It is a quite expensive combo to get out because you need to spend, you know, 5 mana on one of these 2 cards, and then on the other card, you know, you've got like 3 mana. I think is one of the cheapest versions of it. I think actually there's one up here that is potentially 2 mana, which is whenever you gain life, opponent loses that life. Oh no, that's 3 mana as well. So all of them are 3 mana. However, this one here is whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life, which makes it like the combo go faster. But it doesn't matter. It's an infinite combo. So you can just say, hey, I've got an infinite combo here. I win the game. You don't need to actually go through each step of it. So unless an opponent has removal or something. So this is, you know, a way that you're able to win the game. You don't need both of these 2 cards in the deck, and keep in mind that if you do have these cards in your deck, as soon as you play them, they are going to be an infinite combo and you will win the game thanks to it. You could potentially drop one of them, and it obviously drops the price down a whole bunch for this, but also I like having, you know, a couple different ways to be able to win, and this is a great way to be able to win it, as well as, you know, Elenda herself, because, you know, you only need to deal 21 damage to an opponent with your commander. And then, so that's direct combat damage. So that's the alternate way to be able to defeat someone, make someone lose the game, is that they take 21 commander damage, which is combat damage from a commander. And because of the fact that Elenda gets up to a 10-10 really easily, if you've got 10 above your starting life, that means she just has to hit someone twice. Or if you buffed her up even a tiny little bit more than that, now she just needs to hit someone, you know, once. If you buff her up a whole bunch. So, you know, she's a bunch of great ways to be able to win for that. So that's it for today, guys. I'd love to hear from you guys as to what you think. These are the 5 different decks that I would build from the starter collection and stuff. They are going to serve you rather well. They're going to be great decks. I don't think that they're not going to be like the most high powered decks. Don't get me wrong. Like, we're not looking at, you know, competitive competitive commander here, but they are going to be decks that are going to be mostly in line with other commander pre-con decks, as well as you're getting, you know, 5 decks from these boxes in addition to the separate, you know, singles that you are going to have to buy to go alongside with them. And, you know, these are just the suggestions that I have down here in the sideboard. You can fill it in however you like. These are just the decks that I would build, and then you can go and, you know, make it your own, build it yourself, and have fun. And let me know what you guys build. If you guys build anything from these beginner boxes and starter collections for Commander, let me know. I hope you guys had a great day. I'll link all this down in the comments. Have a great day and goodbye.